So Janet, we talk about a lot of serious subjects. Some of them are funny, some of them are, not so serious. But this particular piece really hits home for a lot of people. And when we talk about do you act like you think, that has a lot of different connotations, or it could. So I'm thinking that what we should do is probably just cut to the chase and keep it simple so that those listening in our audience can really absorb what we're talking about.
Okay.
So we mentioned that we're going to have 2 identity stages, and the technical terms for these stages is ethnocentric, as in all about me, and ethno-relative, as in all about everything else.
Okay.
Okay?
All right, good.
All right? So we're going to focus today on the ethnocentric stages.
Okay, the all about me. The all about me part.
All about me part.
All
Okay.
right,
And so it's going to be 3 stages right there.
Okay.
All right. The first stage we have right here in our on our notes here. And you want to talk a little bit about what you see?
Well, there's 3 stages. The denial stage, we're going to talk about defense, and then we're going to talk about the minimization stages.
Right. Now keep in mind the perspective from which we're going to talk about denial, defense, and minimization is from the personal perspective about in terms of how a person views the world away from them.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So denial. What do you see in there about denial?
Okay. Well, denial actually has 2 things. It has 2 subsections.
Right.
It has isolation, and then it has the separation.
Right.
Okay. I understood the isolation under denial is that's kind of like a physical detachment from other lifestyles. Right. It exists basically in other cultures as far as providing no real indication of any cultural differences.
Exactly.
Per se.
So basically, just as if a person was an atheist, they would say, I don't, I believe that a God exists, but it does not pertain to me.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So isolation means that the person just takes his or herself physically away from the other world.
Okay. All right.
That's it.
And then the second one was separation, which actually is denial by choice.
Yes.
It's a choice to separate yourself physically from a particular environment. And I had an example of that I think I shared with you before, is that I used to live in the South, and actually in this particular small town, the town was actually segregated. You had the whites living on the north side of the tracks and blacks living on the south side. And the Chamber of Commerce wanted to bring people together to try to figure out how they could be more of a collaborative community per se. Okay. And one of the people that was in my particular group was a pastor of a church, and he actually got tears in his eyes because he said that he was ashamed that he could not invite me to his church.
Wow.
Because if he had, the majority of his members would actually walk out.
Wow.
So this was a good example of separatization in the fact that this particular church was all white, and they wanted it to stay that way.
Wow.
So I would think that would be an example.
The scary part about that is that we're in 2018, and we still have these types of behaviors.
Right.
And when people act that way, you don't have to ask them what they're thinking.
Right.
Okay.
Right. It's very obvious.
Okay. So now you transpose that to the workplace.
Right.
Okay. And what do you have? Okay.
Well, you have a very, very, I would say, potentially hostile work environment, and people will separate themselves and not be collaborative. As far as teamwork would be difficult. Even promotions, especially if this is a supervisor or a manager, would be extremely difficult for anybody that's not like them.
That's right. And again, the scary part about that is that it's hostile, yes, but the scary part is that it's hostile by choice.
Yes.
See,
that's worse.
Somebody needs that to keep their world real.
That's right. Okay? Absolutely.
All right. So we've got, these rampant active shootings going on around the country right now. Okay, and think about the degree to which the shooter believes that he or she is different than those he or she is shooty.
Right, right.
Okay, it's a us-them dichotomy. That
Absolutely.
binary thinking
Right.
that makes denial such a very volatile and scary stage of identity development to be
Right.
in. Okay, so what else? What's next?
Okay, so the second one is defense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and actually, the defense it's lesser of an impact on the cultural differences, but it's caused by the perception of threats to one's sense of own reality per se. So people in defense, they recognize other cultures and differences. However, but because of fears, a lot of times they conjure up ways to trap or alienate those that are of other cultures. So, and there's 3 of those. So you want to talk about
so
that?
yeah, the 3 subsections. You know, and this is difficult because depending on whether it's a person of color or a person from European descent, denial has different connotations.
Okay.
So,
okay.
So you know, without getting too deep and trying to keep things simple, basically, when we're talking about defense, we're talking about a way to counteract the impact of race and race relations and difference in the workplace. Okay, how can I keep this from being something that I have to deal with?
Right.
So you defend.
Right.
Okay, so in the 3 subsections, for example, for persons of color, one is denigration, and that's where you have common negative stereotyping and overt statements about the other group. Okay, so you're just saying you're using negative slurs as a mechanism to protect your own point of view. Okay, it's all about me, and anybody who's different, shame on you and you SOB for being different from me. Okay? Or another one, in terms of defense, is superiority, where it's not about putting down the other cultures, but it's elevating your own. Okay? Hey, you can have your world, I have mine. Actually, mine is better. That's why you keep bringing the subject up. Okay? Because you really want to be like me. You see? And so, in elevating your own self, you end up denying the existence and the realities of the other person.
Oh,
Okay? That's a form of defense. And then the last is just reversal, where you're denigrating or putting down your own self under the assumption that the other person is superior. And so you're saying, don't talk about little old, poor little at-risk me. Okay? Let's talk about you because it's a much brighter and better story.
Right.
But still you're defending conversation and interest in yourself. Okay? You're defending against that. You're trying to push that away.
Well, you know what? Now that's really interesting because when you think about that as far as being displayed in the workplace,
yes,
a lot of times people will minimize themselves.
That's right.
And actually shine the light on someone else, and unfortunately, what that does is that then it keeps people from seeing their talents and their skills and their abilities. And that could be for a lot of reasons. It could be maybe insecurity. It could be the fact that, the environment is such that they see that there's no promotional for themselves, but if they shine the light on somebody else, then maybe there's an opportunity there later on down the road.
Absolutely.
They'll remember me.
That's right, because I'm a team player.
Right, absolutely.
Because I put somebody else before me.
Absolutely.
It happens all the time.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
so now we've had denial, and we discussed defense.
Right.
Okay, and you use the word minimalization, but in the context of what we're talking about, minimalization is actually the 3rd stage of ethnocentric, the process of ethnocentrism. Okay, so when we talk about minimizing, what we're minimizing is the conflict between the differences, whether it's cultural, whether it's gender, whether it's orientation, what have you. We're minimizing those differences by saying, hey, we're all God's children. We just need to get along. Or we're all cut from the same cloth. We just need to accept our differences and just be different. That way I get to preserve me, and you get to preserve you, whoever you are.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but I know me.
Right.
Okay, and
right.
that's what I'm trying to protect.
Wow.
Okay, so that's what minimalization really is, and it's got two subsections. So look at your notes to see.
Well,
What you think?
because I wanted to say something about that, but when you talk there's two. So the physical universalism,
Right.
and then the transcendent universalism. That's
Right.
that's a mouthful. Okay. The physical is basically is it talking about that we're all biased, or we all have something that we're either dealing with, or we're all biased. In other words, putting everybody in the same boat.
Yeah. Well,
Or kind
yeah.
of.
Yes and no. Bias is a trait, but physical universalism is just that
Okay.
physical. That we're all human. We're all,
okay.
We're we're
Okay.
all
Okay.
X, Y, Z.
Okay.
And as we talk about that, it could be a group of men, for example,
Okay.
who are debating the issues of race or classism or what have you. And somebody may say, "Hey, whatever it is, we're all men, right? So let's just kind of sweep that under the rug."
Oh.
Okay, that's what that's about.
I see.
Okay,
I see.
but still, it's a form of defense,
Yeah.
so that the person doesn't have to deal with his or her responsibility to eradicate or dismantle the isms in the workplace.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
So let's move quickly because our time's running out.
Yeah.
Is that how do we move from the denial, the defense, and the minimalization stages? What do we need to do, or what can we do to bring ourselves out of those stages? So let's just quickly talk about denial.
Yeah. Well, real quick, regardless of what the stage is, you have to do some pre-work
Okay.
in terms of understanding
Okay.
who your staff are and what are some of the issues that are brought to the table, seen and unseen. So, just like in your experience as a leader, it's important for you early on to know who you're managing. Okay?
Yes.
Not just what you're managing,
Right.
but who you're managing. When
Right.
you do that pre-assessment of who you're managing, then you have a better chance of designing programs, in this case, diversity education programs, that will actually be relevant to the stage of identity that the person is in.
Right. Right.
Okay, so that's step one.
Okay.
Then once you get a better sense of who you're educating, then you begin to construct programs that have relevant components that a person can actively interact in, not just for that moment, but day to day throughout their tenure at the workplace.
So then the learning and the exposure and the awareness then is continual, and it
Yes.
becomes a part of the work environment itself.
And ultimately what it means to be an employee of that workplace.
Absolutely.
That's what we're talking about.
Okay. So now, when in moving, especially for the defense, and I know we're right out of time, but just elaborate a little bit on how do you move from that defensive stage for anybody?
Right. Well, it's a slow process, and slow is the key word here.
Okay.
Slow, and the second
Okay.
word is relevance.
Okay.
You have to take a person by the hand, sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly, but you have to say first and foremost, this is a safe place to experiment with difference.
Safe place.
Safe place.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay.
Once you make the
Okay.
place safe,
Yeah.
then you have a person's permission to introduce them to difference. Okay? Because at this, in terms of denial or any part of an early stage in a person's life where their contact with difference is like in your face or happening the first time in their life,
Right.
you have got to be careful about the psychological impact that difference is going to have on them, because that's going to impact how they assert their talent,
Oh, absolutely.
okay, their levels of productivity, etc. So
You're absolutely
That's what
right. I remember back in the early '90s when diversity training became really, really a hot thing. Okay, and it was being the training was everywhere, government, non-government, and there were a lot of issues a lot of issues, and so much so that some agencies actually pulled the diversity training.
Right.
Because they were getting complaints, they were getting hotline complaints, they were getting employees going to see psychologists,
Right.
and all of these different things because of what you just said.
Exactly, exactly.
Wow.
Right. So Jan, there's a lot to these first 3 stages.
Yes.
But let's make it a wrap this time. But for
Okay.
those of you listening, these
Yeah.
are the teachings of Milton Bennett and some other researchers that came out with these identity stages in the middle, late 90s. And as you can tell, they're still very relevant
Very.
to today. So we're going to come back with part 2
Yes.
and continue our discussion.
Yes, we will.